What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 6 preview. So I'm going to go through a bunch of questions and topics which will hopefully help you for the upcoming game week. If it does, and if you enjoy it, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you are new around here as well. And we're going to start off by talking about Erling Haaland, which I think is something we're going to do quite regularly this season because he's so damn good. Another hat-trick back-to-back, and he also came off after the 68th minute against Nottingham Forest. So people are wondering, could he now start against Aston Villa? Because a lot of you want to captain him. I do as well, but I've got to be honest, there's enough doubt in my mind where I'm not sure I'm going to do that, just because I've got Salah there, and I know he hasn't scored now for 2 games, but I don't know if that worries me enough to not give him the captain's armband. So we're going to go through the minutes so far, the upcoming schedule as well, including the Crystal Palace and Forest games for context of how much rest time there has been. Before we get into that, we need to remember what Pep Guardiola has said about him like a week or two ago. Now, we might get new quotes from Pep in the press conference tomorrow, but originally he had said once there's games every 3 days, Haaland will not play all those games, essentially, and Alvarez will play instead. Now, just because he said that doesn't mean that will happen. It might be the case that Haaland, Pep, and the medical staff are really happy with his recovery. The fact they've been able to rest him a little bit during games as well helps, and they might just play him all the way through. I mean, it's already been shown by the fact that he played Palace and Nottingham Forest. It's definitely not a situation where he's going to miss every other game because there's midweek games. It might be that he misses 1 in every 3 at times, 1 in every 4, 1 in every 5. It could even be 1 in every 6. We're not going to know until we see the rest of the games, but it's still worth discussing. So far, there's only 1 game where he's got to 90 minutes, which was game week 3 against Newcastle. They were chasing the game. In pretty much every other game week, once the game was won, he came off. They could have brought him off earlier if they wanted to against Nottingham Forest, but it obviously wasn't a massive concern, so he stayed on till the 68th minute. Luckily for those of us that didn't captain him, didn't get his 4th goal, but that's when he came off. If you look at the schedule, between Palace and Nottingham Forest, there was 3 days off, right? So they played on Saturday. They then had Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday off. Then they played on Wednesday against Forest. The difference between that time period, and then the upcoming one with Villa is they've only got 2 full days off. So they got Thursday, Friday off, and then they play Saturday, right? So it's less than 72 hours because the game is at 5:30. So there's a little bit less rest. So that straight away is a little bit of a concern. Then they've got Sevilla on the 6th of September and then Spurs on the 10th of September. I would find it very surprising if he doesn't play that Champions League game. They don't need him to play that to win these games. They don't need him for a lot of games, right? Because their squad is just so good. Alvarez can play as the 9. Someone else could play as a false 9 as well. Many players in that team have done it before. But I just don't see him missing the first Champions League game. And I also don't think that he's going to miss that Spurs at home game either. I think they're going to definitely want him for that one. So the only question is, if he's going to get rotated, is it Sevilla or is it Villa? And I just think it's probably going to be that Aston Villa game. That's kind of my thinking right now. It's worth saying I'm not 100% confident, right? But that's part of the problem. There is enough doubt there to maybe go somewhere else with the captaincy. Like against Nottingham Forest, I thought he probably would start, but I wasn't necessarily 100% confident about it. And it's the same with Villa. I don't think he will start this game, but I'm still not 100% confident. And that's all we can say. Lots of people are extremely sure that he is or isn't going to play. I just don't think anyone really can be unless you know Pep Guardiola personally or you've got inside information for the club. Looking at some other points, right? Alvarez only had 1 start so far. Now, you can frame that in different ways. Some people will say, well, he's just played 90 minutes. He's going to miss the next game. But I would probably argue that he hasn't played many minutes so far. And Pep probably wanted him to play minutes so that he is ready to play in the upcoming games if they do rest Erling Haaland. Because one of the players he said that will play when Erling Haaland doesn't is Alvarez. We've seen now that they can play together. He obviously played on the right, but he can play as the central striker as well if Haaland doesn't play. And I just think because he's had so much rest, he's also very young. His recovery is also going to be good, that he could easily play that next game. And if it is central, then they could rest Haaland for that Sevilla game and then for that kind of Spurs at home game as well. Obviously, less rest between Forest and Villa than Palace and Forest, which I've already mentioned. And it's worth saying that Pep's not afraid to rest players. He's just rested Kevin De Bruyne. Maybe he needed that a little bit more. Maybe, the fact that they've brought Erling Haaland off a few times made it so that he didn't need the rest right now. But it could be that he wants to rest some of his big name players. players. I mean, they're all pretty big names, I get that, but in different games, right? So he's rested De Bruyne this time. Maybe against Villa it'll be Foden and Haaland, and they'll be back in for the next one, and that's how he's going to do it, rather than rotating Haaland and De Bruyne and Foden all at the same time. So that's worth noting. And I put at the end, surely he plays versus Spurs. I don't think anyone disagrees that he's not going to play that game. So it's just whether you think he's going to get one of the next 2 games off and which one you think is more important. I mean, they can win both games. They're both away. They can win both games with rotating. It just comes down to your personal preference. I don't buy into this kind of narrative that it doesn't matter if he's rested because he can get points off the bench. If you think he's going to be benched, you should not be captaining him. There's going to be someone else in your team that is a better option, and that is the question you have to ask yourself. If you do think he starts against Villa, then the chances are he gets another 65 to 75 minutes, and that probably is enough for captaincy. So if you're 100% sure, absolutely captain him this week. For me, I've got enough doubt, and I think Salah is almost certain to play, even though obviously he's got Europe and stuff to come up. He's a bit of a machine. They don't really have anyone else that can easily replace him. Not right now anyway. Maybe when everyone else is fit. So I'm probably going to go for him. I'm not massively happy about it for what it's worth, because I don't think Everton away is going to be that easy. But I'm also not, like, people keep saying things like Salah is finished. I just don't buy into that at all. And I'm still happy enough to captain him. If I had Kane, for example, this week, I'd also be looking at that as well. So there are a couple of other options, but only if you think Haaland isn't going to be benched. From everything I've kind of looked into and talked about, like in this little bit of this video, I think there's enough doubt for me to not put that captain's armband on him. But don't get me wrong, if he starts again, it's very scary because Aston Villa is a really good fixture right now. So I wanted to take a look at some Rodrigo replacements. It looks like he's going to be out for at least 3 to 4 weeks. So he's pretty much a sell for anyone that has him, whether you're wildcarding early or not. Now, obviously, it's going to depend a little bit on how much money you've got in the bank, whether you want to downgrade to put the money elsewhere. Obviously, only you can decide that from how your team is set up. One thing I just wanted to quickly mention before I talk about the specific midfielders as well, if you've got the transfers, you could switch to someone like Mitrovic. I know I spoke about him earlier in the transfer tips video, said he wasn't fixture proof and stuff like that, but he is putting up really good numbers, and he is going to play every game and 90 minutes. The fixtures from game week 8 onwards are really good. So if you want to save yourself a transfer down the line, and maybe you've already used your wild card or you're not planning to use it until like game weeks 11 or 12, you could just switch those funds from midfield to forwards, whether that's playing 4-3-3 or whatever formation it might be. So that is an option as well. But if you're just going to switch straight to a midfielder, again, Martinelli is still a really good option. I feel like I have to say this every single week, but if you don't own him at 6.4 million, he is still extremely good value. The good fixtures for Arsenal are starting to kind of run out now. So when you are picking your replacement, make sure you have a look at the fixtures and when you might wildcard. So for Martinelli, it's Man United away, Everton at home, then Brentford away. After that, it's Spurs, Liverpool and Man City in the next 4 fixtures. So they play those 3 within 4 game weeks. So he is a bit maybe of a short-term move right now. But again, if you haven't already wildcarded, short-term is probably what you're looking at. And I still really like Martinelli. It won't be an easy game at Man United, but I think Arsenal will score. Then Everton and Brentford are decent enough fixtures as well. So Martinelli probably still top of the list. I would say this is not necessarily in order, although I do think probably Martinelli is at the top. Zaha, again, is someone we spoke about on the transfer tips video. If you want a bit more of my thoughts, make sure to go and watch that. The fixtures are not amazing for Crystal Palace, but they're not awful either. I think he's absolutely nailed on. He's going to start most games for you. Should get 90 minutes in most of them as well. Has penalties. A bit like Mitrovic, to be honest. And I've been very impressed with how Palace have played. So I think with the fixtures easing a little bit, there is plenty of goals there for them too. So I really like Zaha, and I feel like he is like almost just one of those set and forget players. I know like he is one of those players that in the past we've all gone for and it just hasn't really worked out. But I think he's been doing the business for a little while now. I think under Vieira that is a different Crystal Palace team, and they're just full of absolute ballers. I've said that before. So I really like Zaha if you've got 7.1 to spend, but it really is going to depend on what your budget is. A lot of you will be looking at Gross because he's been quite popular in recent weeks. Some people probably even chose between Gross and Rodrigo last week. I still quite like him. I've got him in my own team if I just bring it up here. Leicester at home, fairly good fixture. Bournemouth away, fairly decent as well. Crystal Palace at home, not necessarily ideal, but it's okay. At least it's a home game. But then he does run into Liverpool away and Spurs at home. So it is, again, a little bit of a short-term move. If I'm choosing between Gross and Martinelli, I'm absolutely going for Martinelli. But if you want to save a bit of money, then Gross at 5.9 million is a pretty decent option. The only thing, I own him for sure, but I think Gross is one of those players that if he did nothing over the next 3 game weeks, would we be shocked? Probably not. Maybe the Fulham game is playing on my mind a little bit. I do think they missed not having Welbeck in that game. He stretches the play, and it's not necessarily that he gets all the chances, but he draws defenders away, and that kind of helps players like Gross and Trossard. So hopefully he'll be back in for the next game. I think he came on against Fulham anyway, so he should be fine to start the next game. So that should help out. You could go for Trossard instead. I think it depends how much money you want to pay, but for a lot of you, saving the money for Gross and using that extra cash out elsewhere might be the better option. But if you've got kind of an inkling to go for Trossard instead, I don't think that's a bad move at all. He's almost as good, if not a slightly better option than Gross anyway. So it really just depends on how much money you want to spend. Can't fit every single player on this list, but just worth noting. Bernardo Silva, some people, maybe I did kind of write him off a bit last week. I still don't think he's that great of an option. We've been here before where he does really well, then all of a sudden he does absolutely nothing. Like, Man City players are always going to get points if they play, but he's been playing on the right quite a lot. So we could see Alvarez play there, Mahrez can play there as well, Foden could even move over to the right. And of course, if he's not playing on the right, you'd expect him to play as a number 8. But Gundogan has been getting minutes as well. So I think Bernardo Silva will start more often than not, but he's not completely immune from being rotated himself. And I just don't know if he's the best use of a Man City slot. I think the defence is still pretty good. A lot of us have got Haaland as well. I just don't know if I'd go for Bernardo Silva, but I guess if you've got a team full of kind of solid options and you want one space where you've got a Man City player and Bernardo Silva that's a bit cheaper than the likes of Foden and Gundogan, I guess it's not the worst option in the world, but I just think for 6.9 million, is he worth, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but is he worth spending $1 million more than Gross or 0.5 million more than Martinelli? I'm not sure he is. And for 0.2 million more, you can go and get Crystal Palace's kind of main threat and their penalty taker. So I just think, in isolation, maybe Bernardo Silva is okay, but compared to the other options, I just don't think I would be going for him. I've put Lingard and Harrison on the list. For those of you that want to stay with a Leeds defender, Harrison is definitely there. If we bring up the fixtures again, you're probably looking quite short term, maybe even slightly more short term than the others we've spoken about. Brentford away is not necessarily an easy game, by the way, so it's not like that's a guaranteed haul there, but it's okay. And then obviously Nottingham Forest at home is definitely a really good fixture, but then they run into Man United away. Villa at home's okay, so you could argue that depending on what your view of Man United is, 3 of the next 4, maybe even 4 of the next 4 are okay. Crystal Palace away, Arsenal at home. So they could be decent enough for 3 to 4 fixtures, then you wildcard. And Harrison has looked pretty good. And if you look at the underlying numbers there, 0.19 expected goals, 0.36 expected assists. You could go for Aronson if you wanted to save a bit of money. But I think Harrison looks pretty good right now. The other option is Sinistera. I'd only be slightly concerned because he's only just back from injury. I think he does look good, and I think going forward he might be the best option in that Leeds attack. I just don't know if I would be happy enough to go for him right now. It might be that he's someone for the future instead. So if you're going to target Leeds, I'd probably go for Harrison or Aronson. But if you want to take a bit of a punt, then Sinistera is probably the one to go for at 6.5. Should get regular minutes as long as he can stay fit, right? He's just back from injury. And I've put Lingard in there because I think we have to kind of talk a little bit about Nottingham Forest players. Because the fixtures are pretty good. So Bournemouth at home, Leeds away, Fulham at home. The next 3 are decent. If you're going to take a punt, maybe go for a Nottingham Forest play. Even Leicester away in Game Week 9 is not completely awful either. My main worry with Nottingham Forest is they've got so many options that can play. Like, I think they've signed something like 18 or 19 players. The transfer window's not even shut yet. They could sign a few more. And I think as good as like maybe Lingard was at kind of West Ham, as good as players like Gibbs White have been as well, I just don't know if their minutes are completely assured. Like, he got nothing against Man City. I don't think he was injured. I could be wrong on that. Please let me know in the comments if I am. I did look it up. I couldn't see anything about an injury. I'm assuming he's going to play the next game, but it's when will he get brought off? Against Spurs, it was 68 minutes. The previous games were like 90, 90, 83, but obviously they've got more signings. They're going to start integrating them into the team. So I don't know if he's going to be a 90-minute man like maybe he would have been at West Ham. Then you've got Gibbs White as well, 57 minutes against Man City, 90 against Spurs, 29 against Everton. Is there just going to be too much rotation? That's my main worry. And then you go back to this list, are Lingard and Gibbs White, and I know they're different prices, so it's going to depend on how much you want to spend, but are they better than Martinelli? Are they better than Gross? Maybe they're better than Gross just because of the next 3 fixtures, but only if you think they're going to get enough minutes. And I just think, I don't know, Nottingham Forest fans, let me know down below if I've got it completely wrong, but I just think there's so many options there. They could get rotated, especially with the 5 subs. And I guess the other problem with Nottingham Forest, just to quickly finish on this, They've had fairly tough games, right? Man City and Spurs are obviously really difficult. They got 1 goal against Everton, 1 goal against West Ham, nothing against Newcastle. Now, they have made a lot of new signings, but it's a lot of players to integrate. And I'm just not sure we really know how good their attack is going to be. Like, I think Lingard and Gibbs White are okay, but you are pretty much just going them for a fixtures play, which is fine because the fixtures are good enough. But I don't know. I just don't know if I'm looking at the players on this list. I just don't think that I put those Nottingham Forest boys in. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe they'll absolutely smash it with the good fixtures. Maybe they'll get enough minutes, but I'm just not sure it's for me right now. It feels like Andrew Robertson owners are just not going to be happy until they transfer him out. There's a question about him every single week, and I kind of get it, right? There's frustration there because maybe Liverpool haven't kept as many clean sheets as we'd hope. Robertson obviously not had enough attacking returns, and a lot of people just were deciding between him and Diaz at the start of the season. So that kind of just increases the frustration. Meanwhile, a lot of cheap defenders are also doing pretty well. So what should we do with Robertson? Double Liverpool defence doesn't seem to be doing too good, and he might become more rotated. I've got to be honest, people seem very worried about the rotation, and I know he's been brought off early a few times. To be honest, if they had a clean sheet at any of those points where he would have been brought off early, everyone would be really happy that that was happening. But he hasn't been rotated during midweek yet. Maybe it will happen at the weekend, but we'll almost certainly get early team news because it's the first fixture. So I think the rotation concerns are basically being built up by the community because he hasn't done as well as they would have hoped. They think that Klopp's going to drop him, but it's obviously clear that Robertson's the first choice. Tsimikas might get a game at some point, but I don't think it's going to be that often. I think if we're talking about Haaland, maybe getting rested like 1 in every 5, 6, whatever it might be, I think it's the same for Robertson. He's not going to start missing every other match. So I wouldn't be that concerned about rotation, but let's see what happens this weekend. Like I said, we should hopefully get early team news. Make sure you check in with the deadline stream. Should we look at James or Trippier as replacement? So couple of things, right? One, with Robertson, his own personal attacking numbers are down. That is a little bit concerning. And obviously, he is quite a lot of money, and you can get quite a few cheaper defenders if you want to put that money in attack. I've kind of said this for the last few weeks. I've never been against that. I think there's lots of good fixtures. Like Newcastle at home was okay, although they played pretty well, to be fair, Newcastle. Bournemouth at home was a perfectly good fixture to keep Robertson for as well. And they've got some decent games coming up. So this week, for example, it is Everton away. Maybe Derby game, that might be tricky. Then Wolves at home, and then Chelsea away. So by game week 8, you're probably going to be looking to get rid of your Chelsea players anyway. So it's whether or not you want to keep them for the next couple. I think it's perfectly okay to keep them if you've not got anything better to do. And it's kind of the same answer as for the last couple of weeks. If you've got 2 free transfers, if you've got a good way to use that money, sure, get rid of him and upgrade your attack instead. Maybe upgrade a different defender if you wanted to. Like if you had Robertson and Neco Williams, maybe this week's not the best week to take Neco Williams out, but swapping those two to like a, what's the price? It's nearly 11 million, right? So having 2 5-ish million pound defenders, that might be better most weeks, right? So that is perfectly okay. So is using that money to upgrade your attacker. But ultimately, I don't think you're ever going to be in a position where Robertson has to be sold. Like if it's just Robertson to Trippier this week and you're not using that money for anything else and you've not got any real plans for it, I would probably just hold Robertson, right? His own personal numbers might be down, but in terms of defensive numbers for Liverpool, they are on 0.98 expected goals conceded per game so far. That makes them the joint 4th best defence in the league so far. I know they've got some injuries and stuff in midfield, and that's not necessarily helping, but maybe they've been a little bit unfortunate to maybe not get one extra clean sheet here or there, right? And again, Newcastle played really well last night, definitely deserved their goal. But the next 2 fixtures, Everton and Wolves, look pretty good, I would say, for at least 1 clean sheet, and then hopefully his attacking potential will increase. And again, coming back to that caveat that we have to use all the time at the moment, his numbers might be down, but it's a small sample size. Look at Saka, for example. His numbers were down. You watched that game last night. He was very unfortunate to not get more attacking returns, and it could be that Robertson kind of turns it on sooner rather than later. So I wouldn't be in a rush to get rid of him. Do I think Reece James is better over the next 2? Yeah, quite possibly if he's available, because their fixtures are also quite good. The defence might not have been quite as good as Liverpool so far this season in terms of underlying numbers, but James is a better attacker. So if you wanted to do that move, fair enough. But if it's Robertson to Trippier, no real way to use that money, I'd probably just keep hold of Robertson personally. So a lot of it's going to depend on whether you've got 2 free transfers and how you redistribute those funds, to be honest. Okay, so Mo Salah, is it time to consider going Salahless? Even if he starts and scores a few goals at 13 million, there seems to be better value elsewhere, especially up front. Now, I've talked about value quite a bit so far this season. I feel like there's two different types, so let's go through it again. One is your classic, really good points per million player. Let's take Gabriel Martinelli, 6.4 million, but you could argue he's just as good, if not slightly better right now, than Saka, who is more expensive. So I think we can all agree that Martinelli is a really good value player. I spoke about at the start of the season that players like Reece James at 6 million, I felt like they were really good value compared to the likes of Robertson, Cancelo and Trent Alexander-Arnold, who in their own right are probably also really good value players, okay? So they're a little bit cheaper than the points potential that they've got. That's one type of value. The other is captaincy. So we pay more for the likes of Salah and Kane and Haaland because although they won't necessarily be great for points per million come the end of the season, although if Haaland keeps getting 10 returns every 5 games, that might be a different story, but we pay for them because they will consistently get fairly decent scores. That's where the value lies. So is it time to consider going Salahless? That depends how often you want to captain him. If you're genuinely just going to keep captaining Haaland and not go for Salah, you could spread the money around. You could downgrade him to an £8 million midfielder, maybe a Sterling if you wanted to. Use that money to upgrade one of your forwards, one of your defenders, your goalkeeper, whatever it might be. And there might be better value in doing that if you're sure you're not going to captain him. Now for me, I've looked at the underlying numbers. I spoke about this last week. Not much has changed. His underlying numbers look pretty good compared to last season. They're almost identical. Now, that tells me if that carries on, he is going to get a similar amount of returns this season as he did last season. Now, it's impossible to predict exactly when they will happen. He could score 10 in the next 10. He could score 10 over the next 20 and then get loads come the end of the season. We don't know. But if those underlying numbers, expected goals and expected assists, remain the same, I would expect him to get a similar amount of returns, right? Now, you could argue that Haaland, even if Salah keeps up those numbers, Haaland is the better option. But again, that is going to come down to you. Are you happy to captain him if he's a slight doubt to start because of possible rotation? Only you can answer that. But I look at it and just think this week, if I'm not going to captain Haaland against Villa, which I don't think I'm going to, Salah is my next best option. So that provides value to me because I want to captain him. I'm not going to go for anyone else in my team. And then game week 7, he's got Wolves at home. Now, you could, again, captain Haaland because I think he will start this game against Spurs, but it's not that easy of a fixture. So if Liverpool and Salah do really well against Everton, suddenly the narrative will change. Well, Salah's back in form. He scored a goal now. He's got Wolves at home. That's a good fixture. He's at Anfield. Haaland's got Spurs. That's not quite as easy. And I'm not prepared to not have that option in my team. Maybe from game week 8 onwards, I'll look at it. But right now, the value for me lies in captaincy. I want to captain him this week and probably game week 7. Therefore, I'll probably keep him. Okay, so forwards, right? There was hardly any last year. This year it feels like maybe there's too many. Is 3 forwards the way to go now? Tony, Mitrovic and Isak are all options. And I fully agree, right? With Tony and Mitrovic, we talked about this a lot already this season. Absolutely nailed on. 90 minutes, penalties, playing in good teams that are going to attack. They're really good options, right? And Isak, I'm pretty sure his minutes are also going to be really good. Even if Wilson is available and fit, I think Isak is still going to be in that front 3 way more often than not. For Newcastle, the penalty situation maybe not quite so clear, but he really did impress against Liverpool. Almost had a second goal, very close to being onside. And I think he will be a good option going forward when Newcastle's fixtures are good. So there's lots of forward options. And there's lots of options we could definitely put in our team. Is it the way to go, though? I'm not so sure about that right now. Mostly because, if anyone's got a 3 forward formation, you're probably doing quite well. But I don't think it's so good that we need to kind of not have the midfielders we got or, start taking money out of the defence. I think players like Trent Alexander-Arnold, Reece James, João Cancelo, they've still got something to say about being some of the best value players at their price points. On wildcard, around game week 8 or 9, if that's when you're going to go for it. A lot of people are going to have Haaland. Everyone's going to go for Mitrovic. I don't even think it matters if he goes up in price a bit from where he is now. If you look at Fulham's fixtures, game week 8 is Nottingham Forest away. Then it's Newcastle at home, West Ham away. The good fixtures basically last all the way to game week 14. And at that point, you can just reassess and decide what to do before the last 2 games before the World Cup. So I think most people are going to have Haaland and Mitrovic on wildcard. It's then just a case of whether the third forward is a better option than an extra defender or an extra midfielder. And we'll just have to wait and see around wildcard time. Like Jesus, for example, for Arsenal, around game week 9, the fixtures really turn. So I think a lot of people will move off him. But if there's a good £8 million midfielder, or maybe big at the back is still doing really well, either 4 or 5 at the back, it might be a case that people don't go for the third forward. One of the reasons in past seasons that they've not necessarily been great, it's not because last season it was because there was a lack of options, and maybe at times they're just a bit overpriced. It's just because of how much the game has changed and how well these fullbacks like Trent and Robertson and Reece James as a wing-back and João Cancelo have been performing. They've got all these extra avenues to points, goals, assists and clean sheets, bonus points. Whereas with forwards, it's a bit more difficult to get those big hauls because you need at least 2 goals, because most of them don't necessarily get a huge amount of assists. They don't get the extra point for the goal. They don't get the extra point for a clean sheet. So I don't think it's clear cut is what I'm trying to say. I think there are plenty of forwards where you could have a 3 forward formation, but I don't think we're at the point where that is the absolute go-to formation. But let's see on wildcard. Alright, so Perisic. What should we do with Perisic? It seems unlikely he starts against Fulham at home, which is obviously this week in Game Week 6. If getting rid, who are the best non-template replacers? I'm not going to go through non-template, because to be honest, I don't think we should be worried about that. All we should be focusing on is getting the most points. Is he going to start against Fulham? That is kind of a key question. So I think the problem for Perisic owners is he played 90 minutes against West Ham. For what it's worth, I think it's almost a similar situation to Haaland. When Conte can play him, when Perisic is well rested and he's recovered, he's going to be that first choice left wing back. He is definitely ahead of Sessegnon. It's just whether or not he's recovered enough for the next game. And I think they got to bring him off after 75 against Wolves, 73 against Forest. There has to be some concern after West Ham whether he will play against Fulham at home. Like, that is a game that Sessegnon could do really well. There is a guy I think called Paul O'Keefe on Twitter that a lot of people have been kind of retweeting. He sometimes puts up a prediction, but apparently he's got a lot of information, and often the prediction is basically just the team. So that's worth keeping an eye out. He may put that out before the weekend's game, and if I'll retweet it if he does. And if Sessegnon's in there, I would be worried about a start. And then obviously the fixture in Game Week 7 is then Man City away. And I think a lot of it then comes down to when you're wildcarding. Like, if you're... I know I keep saying if. Like, I'm not fully decided. I'll probably do a video on it next week. I don't think there's enough time this week to discuss different options. But if you're going to wildcard around Game Weeks 8, 9, 10, and he's going to miss Fulham, and then he's got Man City away, which you'd assume Man City will score in. Maybe Spurs can get the win there, but I think they will concede. Then Leicester at home is a good fixture, but who knows how rotation and stuff has been going at that point by Europe. So if you think he's not going to play against Fulham, I think you can make a case to get rid. The problem is he's so good. It's always that carrot on a stick thing. He's so good that he can get returns in any game, even off the bench, even if he plays against Man City. Even if they concede, he could still get an attack and return. But I do think a case can be made to sell him if you don't think he starts against Fulham. And I think that 90 minutes would really put me off predicting a start. I think he will probably be on the bench, but again, I could be wrong. In terms of replacements, I think for anyone that doesn't have an Arsenal defender, I would probably just avoid. Man United away is not ideal. Everton at home is good. Brentford away is okay, and then the bad fixtures start. I think it's the wrong time to bring in an Arsenal defender. So I'd probably overlook at Trippier. Newcastle have got some good fixtures coming up, or I'd look to the Brighton assets, depending on how much money you've got to spend. If you can afford to go to Reece James, and Tuchel says he's available, West Ham at home, Fulham away looks pretty good. He would be my go-to, but otherwise, Trippier or a Brighton defender. If you want to go for a bit of fun, Estepinian, the left wing back, could be good. If you want to go safe, maybe go for Dunk. I was a little bit surprised about the volume of questions around Neco Williams and some of the players that people want to bench for him, like Martinelli, for example. I'm not sure I can get behind that, even with Man United away, but there were a lot of questions. So this one is, with the high expected goal involvement in Neco Williams and the great fixtures that Nottingham Forest have, should we downgrade double Chelsea or double City or even Trent Alexander-Arnold to get him? I feel like even with the way Liverpool have played so far and kind of the lack of clean sheets, getting rid of Trent for Neco Williams just seems absolutely crazy for me. I guess you could maybe justify it if you're then using that money elsewhere for like a really big attacker upgrade, but I just don't think that's something I would do. I also don't think I would get rid of double City defence before Aston Villa away. The thing to consider with Neco Williams, right, and he is a really good cheap option, and if I had him I would be tempted to play him this week, but it really is going to depend on who you're benching instead, because yes, his expected goal involvement is high, right? It's higher than Robertson right now. You can see from watching the games from that right wing back position, he does get forward, he does get into the box, he's having shots, he's creating chances. So from that perspective, it's really good. And again, I wouldn't begrudge anyone that wants to play him this week. It is one of their best fixtures of the season. But on the flip side, they are one of, if not the worst defence in the league. I think them and Bournemouth are going to be the ones that most of us are targeting this season. So you're looking at it as, well, Neco Williams has Bournemouth, therefore there's a good chance of attacking returns. Whereas Bournemouth are probably thinking, right, this is our chance to finally get some goals, some proper goals in, and maybe maybe even get the win, because Nottingham Forest defence just has not been great. So the idea of selling double City defence or Trent to get him, I just think, for me, would be out of the question. Again, unless you've got a really big upgrade you can do elsewhere that's going to get you some more points. Double Chelsea, maybe, but then I look at it and think, okay, they've signed Fofana now. They're probably going to get an extra midfielder in. Kovacic is maybe coming back to somewhere close to full fitness. Maybe he's got a few more games to go. West Ham at home, okay, that's not an easy fixture. Then Fulham away, again, you could argue that's not an easy fixture either. You could maybe come off double defence to get him. But if I had Reece James and I was thinking to sell to Neco Williams, even with Bournemouth at home, I just don't think I would do it. So again, he's a very cheap defender. If that allows you to make another move, great. But in terms of getting him in for Trent, it just feels like crazy to even think about that. Yes, his attacking potential is good, but the defensive potential is just not there, even with these good fixtures. I could still see them conceding in like maybe 2 or 3 of the next 3. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I just think they're that bad in defence. There we go. Hopefully you enjoyed that and found it useful. If you did, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. We will have the team selection video tomorrow. Although all my team have played, I've got no players left in the Man United Leicester game. I wanted to wait until that finished, just in case it affects my thinking for next week. It probably won't, but you never know. And then I'll have my final kind of game week rank, overall rank and stuff like that as well. So once that game's done, I'll get that video recorded for tomorrow morning. That will be out. We'll probably do like a final thoughts video as well in the evening, just for anything that I haven't covered in this video or anything we get from the press conferences as well. So if there are any other questions, I'll try and get to them before the deadline. And of course, we'll have a deadline stream on Saturday as well. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. There's a members stream on Friday tomorrow. I haven't quite decided on time, but it'll probably be about 1 or 2 o'clock. If you want to get involved with that, make sure you click the join button on my YouTube channel and select one of the top 2 tiers. They get Discord access and the live stream access as well every single week. So make sure to check that out. Otherwise, I'll leave this video there. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe if you're new around here. And I'll catch you again tomorrow.